Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Today I'm going to give you 4 reasons why you should stop playing Dungeons and Dragons in 2025, or whatever year this happens to be. And no, you're going to go to hell is not one of them. I lived through the Satanic Panic. It's fine. You'll be all right. And this is not an anti-Dungeons and Dragons video. I've played Dungeons and Dragons off and on in some form for the last 40 plus years. That's not the point. But I'm going to go over these 4 reasons I thought of, and each one of them really should be its own video, but I just want to kind of fly over these really fast and just, give you some food for thought. The first one is if you're just playing Dungeons and Dragons or games that are like Dungeons and Dragons, like Pathfinder or, yes, even Hyperborea, you're missing out. There are thousands of role-playing games out there. And it's not just that they have different worlds and different conceits and different idioms, and maybe it's sci-fi, maybe it's cosmic horror, maybe it's playing Commandos, whatever it happens to be. It's just that the procedures, the mechanics, so many things about them can be so vastly different that you think that, oh, it's just like this but different, and it's not. You're missing out big time. So there's a huge world of role-playing games out there. So stop playing D&D and play those. Second one, number 2, the game, especially in its current form, is way too complicated for new gamers, especially children. I would never recommend getting a kid Dungeons and Dragons as their first game and playing with them, despite the fact that it's this super popular game, that's what they're seeing people playing. I've had the experience of playing it with children, and it just has this huge barrier to entry, and people get so flummoxed, and it's not very well written either, by the way. They get so flummoxed, they just can't understand it, and so many people turn away from the hobby because it's so convoluted, so complex, and a lot of times, maybe that's not what they're really interested in. Maybe they're not interested in fantasy at all, but they would love playing something like Star Trek or Star Wars or, The Terminator, or maybe just investigators in this world investigating mundane things, or maybe it's more like X-Files, or you know what I mean. There's a whole bunch of things out there. But it's way too complicated for new people. Third thing is Dungeons and Dragons kills the conversation. And this is something that my friend Anthony, the Runeslinger, says all the time. And what do we mean? It's like, it makes you think in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, in terms of like the terms and the concepts and the conceits and the procedures. And when you start to have conversations with other people about role-playing games, you can tell all of a sudden that they have this Dungeons and Dragons mindset, and everything filters through that. And they're talking about encounter balance and, encounter design and 5-room dungeons and, story manipulation and on and on. And it just kills the conversation. When you go out there and you see some of these other role-playing games and you stop trying to make them conform to Dungeons and Dragons and instead take them for what they are, your thinking gets expanded greatly. And I've had this experience, so I know what I'm talking about. But it kills the conversation because once you've done that and you've seen a broader world, you go back and you talk to people and you realize you can't talk to them on the same level because they're still thinking that way because the conversation's been killed in that main sense. And the fourth thing, which kind of naturally dovetails from number 3, is if you're designing your own game, stop trying to recreate Dungeons and Dragons. So many people, when I look at the games they're trying to make, or they're in groups or forums, so many of them are trying to recreate Dungeons and Dragons, but better, but different. And they think in terms of all these concepts and all these conceits of Dungeons and Dragons, and you realize they're not looking at the broader picture. Their thinking has not been expanded to the point where they can consider different ways to conceptualize of role-playing or mechanics or procedures, because everything's getting filtered through this Dungeons and Dragons mindset. And as a result, their game design is greatly stilted. So there's 4 reasons not to play Dungeons & Dragons in 2025. Go out there. It's a giant world. Enjoy it. Role-playing games and the role-playing game hobby is enormous and diverse. And there are games out there that are for you that you just don't know about yet.